Since ancient times, living bodies have interested Western and Eastern civilizations from ancient Greece to India and China. In De Anima, Aristotle once described his nuanced conception of life as self-nutrition and growth and decay. It follows that every natural body which has life in it is a substance in the sense of a composite. Aristotle's keen power of observation anticipated what classical physiology would identify as homeostasis over 2,000 years later. In the late 1800s, Claude Bernard, a prominent figure in classical physiology, was best known for discussing the constancy of an organism's internal environment, a precursor to the more formalized concept of homeostasis that would develop in the early 1900s. Bernard famously stated that the stability of the internal environment is the condition for the free and independent life. Significantly, this suggested dynamic control processes within organisms capable of maintaining a steady state. Homeostasis is an organism-level biological process supporting the equilibrium of organismic form and function despite constant fluctuations in the organism through energy exchanges with the external environment. Nervous, endocrine, and immune system functions maintain this process. Lower-level cellular and molecular functions involved in processes like homeostasis weren't known to classical physiology, which was mainly concerned with higher-level functions of organs, organ systems, and the organism as a whole. While physiologists like Bernard embraced a holistic approach to science, simultaneously chemists were synthesizing organic compounds like urea and acetic acid from their constituent elements, giving rise to the reductionist notion that biology could be completely reduced to physics and chemistry. Molecular biology arose during the mid-1900s as technologies from physics and chemistry became sophisticated enough for biological application. Although classical cell theory was established in the mid-1800s, 200 years after cells were first observed, the interactions and mechanisms underlying cellular behavior weren't thoroughly understood. In 1953, utilizing X-ray crystallography, James Watson, Francis Crick, Rosalind Franklin, and others first observed the double helix structure of deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. This catalyzed explosive interest in molecular biology and the subsequent field of genomics, which dominated 20th century biology. In 1957, Crick proposed the central dogma of molecular biology, claiming that information only flows in one way, bottom-up, from the lowest level of organization to the highest. Spanning from 1990 to 2003, the Human Genome Project, HGP, was the pinnacle of 20th century molecular biology. HGP aimed to identify, map, and sequence all genes in the human genome from a physical and functional perspective. It promised, among other innovations, a revolution in medicine by improving the predictive capacity to identify genetic indications of potential diseases before they develop. Delivering on such promises required reconstructing higher levels of organization by scaling up newfound genomic information and creating computational models of tissues, organs, etc. This gave rise to a new wave of systems biology, pragmatic systems biology, where models generally adopted a bottom-up causal viewpoint sympathetic to reductionism where organisms are seen as aggregate unities. Before the popularization of systems biology at the turn of the 20th century, the discipline existed throughout the mid-1900s among systems theorists and organicists. This more philosophically informed approach to systems biology is known as systems-theoretic biology and favors biological models derived from a top-down perspective. Observations of top-down phenomena, such as organisms or organ systems triggering cellular signaling or determining gene expression, and protein machinery reading genes, refute the central dogma of molecular biology due to information flowing from higher levels of organization to lower ones. Cutting-edge observations of 21st century biology suggest that a more holistic conceptual framework is necessary to account for bidirectional feedback dynamics between levels of organization, where information flows top-down and bottom-up. This is because organisms are integral unities whose constituents are codependent on each other and intimately integrated with the totality of the whole. As contemporary physiologist Dennis Noble says, there is no privileged level of causation. This brief historical sketch shows the dialectical movement of necessity connecting 19th century classical physiology, thesis, 20th century molecular biology, antithesis, and 21st century systems biology, synthesis. Elucidating the reason underpinning this historical development requires further consideration of the logical distinctions between holism and reductionism. Reductionism relies on the principle of parsimony, that the simplest explanation is usually correct. Thus, wholes are nothing but the sum of their parts. Reductionism says that wholes are entirely understood through bottom-up models depicting upward causation that thoroughly analyze basic parts and reconstruct the whole as a mere aggregate. Subjective aspects of biological systems like consciousness or cognition, volition, and emotion are reduced to causally impotent products, epiphenomena, of simple material building blocks. While reductionism is based on an unproved ontological claim biased toward parsimony, the concept of reduction remains a valuable analytic tool for biology that analyzes certain aspects of a thing's constituent parts and reintegrates this understanding with the whole, which contextualizes and completes the knowledge of the parts and whole simultaneously. Reductionism gives all causal priority to the lowest level of organization such that the genome is solely responsible for higher-order biological activity, but this approach leads to the vanishing of biological functions like heartbeat. One's heartbeat is a result of the interaction between numerous proteins, which are genes, and the electrical activity of living cells within which the genes are embedded and contextualized. Such biological phenomena require a conceptual framework beyond reductionism. This leads us to holism, which is synthetic, i.e., it establishes synthesis among apparently disparate aspects of nature. Wholes are more than the sum of their parts, and the whole exerts downward causation, where higher levels of organization significantly influence lower levels. Cognition, volition, and emotion are causally potent. They can manifest through all levels of organization and exert observable influence. Stress from the external environment influences cortisol levels in the brain. Reciprocally, a distressed person can turn an otherwise peaceful environment into a stressful one. Organisms trigger cellular signaling and determine gene expression. Cells make decisions and actively cooperate with each other. The genome is a read-write data storage system intentionally and actively modified by cells based on their cognitive experience. Holism accommodates upward, downward, and reciprocal causation by contextualizing everything at the appropriate level of organization for the current circumstance, and remains conscientious of the fundamental interconnectedness that permeates all parts of nature and the broader reality. Adopting a holistic or reductionist approach is also relevant in psychology, where professionals consider if complex behaviors can be reduced to more simple parts. In psychology, reductionism manifests as the reduction of human behavior to biological variables, where treating depression, for instance, requires looking for genes that have influenced neurochemistry, and treating depression means correcting the neurological imbalance, or the reduction of behavior to environmental stimulus response mechanisms such that present behavior is the result of past reinforcement where certain acts were rewarded and others punished. In cognitive psychology, the dynamic between the brain and thought is reduced to an overly simplified machine metaphor where the brain is understood as hardware and thoughts are software. Holism manifests in the humanistic psychological approach where explaining behavior requires consideration of all the facets of a person, including biological and environmental factors, internal thoughts and emotions, socio-cultural pressures, and the dynamic interaction of all these influences on one another. This spectrum of factors influencing human behavior provides psychology with hierarchical levels of explanation that consider collective sociological phenomena more influential than individual psychological or physiological phenomena. However, all levels contribute to the totality of behavior. Validating Aristotle's ancient insights about the relevance of teleology to natural science, contemporary scientific progress recognizes intrinsic purposefulness throughout levels of organization in biological systems. Since the context of the whole clarifies the purpose of its parts, the importance of adopting a holistic approach to scientific investigation has become increasingly clear. Systems thinking offers a thoughtful and robust way to move forward, facilitating insights into feedback loops between the organism, cells, and molecules on the microscopic scale, as well as feedback between organisms and the environment, like niche construction and biomimicry, on the macroscopic scale. Current systems biology emphasizes mathematical modeling as the primary focus, but if philosophical insights into the ontology of systems can be simultaneously cultivated alongside mathematical analysis, based upon a thorough survey of the history of ideas and philosophy of science, then modern science will be conceptually equipped to reach deeper, more comprehensive conclusions that benefit all humanity and the other living entities whom we share this world with. We hope to discuss and consider these ideas further during Science and Scientist 2024, Systems Biology, the Scientific Understanding of Life Beyond Reductionism. Kindly consider visiting the conference webpage for further details.